Let's continue. Ms. Claudia Mo, the second round, sorry. It's really a third round for me, Chairman. Ms. Claudia Mo? May I refer to the letter from the Catholic Workers Center. They have approached our complaints division, and it is said that there was a case in which EMs even can't just remain at one end of the corridor. I understand that now you give them 2 smaller units if they are a large family, but this is not the most effective way to use land. You should know that instead of a big unit, you are assigning them 2 smaller units. And this pastoral center is asking whether there can be any rental assistance. It doesn't include a lot of details. It just talks about rent assistance schemes. Will you consider that? Number 2, you say there are no large units for families with 6 persons or above. And you say that among applicants for PRH, such families only take up less than 1%. That is, from next year to 2021, there will be the completion of 7,100 units, and 10% or 700 units will be large units. Is that right? I think that would be a fair way to do it. I think this may not be within the purview of the department, but the Bureau, because the Bureau can decide on the size of flats to be produced. Can you not consider that? Because we are talking about just 700 units. Thank you, Chairman, and Ms. Mo, for your question. We can see that Hong Kong's demographic structure is such that we have smaller and smaller families. And for a few years now, new units are designed to be of a size of 35 square meters with 2 rooms only. We understand EMs usually have larger families. When we had old units that can accommodate 9 persons, we were able to use them, but these units had to be surrendered to us before we could use them. They had to be vacated by tenants who move out. And of course, these units are not only for the use of EMs. As long as there are large units and large families, we'll try to match them and allocate the units. But as you know, we are not designing large units anymore, and we go for 2-room units now. The EMs have told us that if we allocate 2 units, I understand we are using our resources. And if EMs do not prefer 2 units because they can't take care of their family, then it's all right. Every applicant has 3 chances. We'll record their wishes, and we will try to give them a bigger unit for their choice. Can you confirm that starting from last year, there will be the production of 700 units, which are large in size? Can you answer that point? Well, we are not going to build units for 6-person families. The largest unit can accommodate only 5 persons. And these units would be of a size of 35 square meters with 2 rooms. And they would take up a bigger proportion of the flats to be produced. Dr. Junius Ho, Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I've missed any points and maybe some answers have been given already, but let me ask this question. Your hotline 2712-2712. I believe that's a landline, but can you also provide a mobile number so your support for them can be even more flexible? Can you consider that? 2, allocation and decanting. You said you would have flexible arrangements at your centers. I'd like to know how many EMs are in the waiting list. Do they wait the same time as Hong Kong residents? It used to be 3 years, 3.5 years. Now it's over 4 years. How long do EMs wait? There are different races. I know the Indian, Pakistani are a big group, and the Nepali. Altogether, there are 70 to 80,000 people in these groups. Among these, how many are applying for PRH? Can you please give me the figures? Thank you. Mrs. Ho, do you have the figures? Now, I don't know whether this is regarded as discriminatory according to the EOC. In Hong Kong, we don't have positive discrimination, but Mrs. Ho, let us see whether you have the figures. Thank you, Chairman. Whether it's EM or ethnic locals or even overseas people, they wait in the same queue. EMs do not have a queue of their own.
Well, for the EMs, they have large families, and if we're able to find vacated large units for allocation to EM families, basically there aren't many, and usually we would look at the preferred district and the supply of public housing in the district. What about the for HA hotline 2712-2712? I want to know whether, well, I don't know whether a mobile phone number would be more popular. Apart from 2712-2712, we also have 1823. That's another hotline which takes inquiries. And in fact, for housing department, we have a number of lines under 1823 for receiving comments or inquiries from applicants. And if things are still not clear, we will ask the person making the inquiry to approach Chair for Chair to call 1823. For 2712-2712, do you have any statistics? Usually, how long is the waiting time? Should we try now? How long should we wait until the line comes through? 1823 is a very direct hotline. For the hotline 1823, we have many agents handling calls. What about 2712? That number? Well, get an understanding, see if this number is more acceptable. Just a follow-up question. For 1823, you may not have the 7 EM languages. You may have English, agents, but not Thai and other EM languages. For the 7 EM languages, the service is provided by Chair, not by the HA's 2712-2712. Oh, that's what I thought. So the service is provided by Chair. Look, I just want to make sure that seamless care is provided in your service.
So
you're suggesting that there is equal treatment for all applicants regardless of their race, their waiting time will be the same. Will this give a perception that we are not caring enough for the EMs, but at the same time we're not giving them preferential treatment? I want to know how many EM applicants there are in the waiting list, and whether the average waiting time is more or less the same as other local applicants. Well, Mrs. Ho, without causing race discrimination without contravening the ordinance, will you consider collecting such data for reference only? I think Dr. Junius Ho would like to get an understanding of the situation and see if more support is needed. The average waiting time at present is 4.9 years. For EM applicants, whether they fare better or worse than the average in terms of their application, I think it's difficult to gauge because the average waiting time is affected by many factors. For example, their preferred districts, the size of the household, and whether there are sufficient number of flats for allocation in the districts that they prefer. Or perhaps, to make things simpler, give us some figures relating to the applications that you receive on the waiting list to get a general understanding. We're not talking about any case in particular. Just a ballpark figure will do. Ms. Ng, you've raised your hand. Thank you, Chairman. Let me supplement. In our application form, as long as the applicant meets the eligibility requirement, the 7-year residence rule, etc., that will do. We will not ask the applicant to state his nationality. As long as the applicant is eligible, the applicant can submit the form and be registered. That we don't require a declaration of race. But it's not race discrimination because, like you said, for EM applicants, you will send the letter along with a leaflet. So it's just an estimation, give us some idea expressed in percentage. I think that's what Dr. Junius Ho wants, right? You just nodded. Just go back and think about it without contravening the policies and principles. See if you can do more. Mr. Xiu Ka-chun, 3 minutes. I think you agree that this subcommittee really want to give specific suggestions to the government. Just now, another member asked about the use of webcam and the provision of simultaneous interpretation service. You just now said that there are 2 webcams, but we don't want to stop here. Do you have any specific proposal in the future to install more webcams for interpretation service, in particular for communities with more EM residents in Sham Shui Po or Kwai Chung? Will webcams be set up there? And Ms. Claudia Mo just now made a very humble request. She was only asking for an English version. Let's say if you read the name of the applicant and if clearly the applicant is not Chinese, then can the leaflet in different EM languages be given to the applicant instead of just English? And it may be difficult to read from the Chinese name whether the person is a local or an EM. We have a Chinese. We have the Chinese name Lei Guan'er, and also some other names, and we know very clearly that she is an EM, and there was a French exchange student with the name Gek Li Dik Hoi Dam, and just by reading this name, you wouldn't know whether the person is local or not. So the administration should do more. Instead of just reading names, you should have some empathy to make sure that the EM residents can have a better living environment. Your response, please. Thank you, Chairman. About the promotion of webcam or interpretation service through webcam, we can discuss with the estate management staff. But basically, we need to work out with Chair how to resolve the technical issues. I just received some response from the EM friends. Chairman, I'd like to supplement about the webcams. very often the documents cannot be displayed clearly, and then the applicant will be asked to sign on the documents. So please go back and review the situation. Yes, we're aware of that, and we are trying to resolve the problem with a fax machine. The webcam can be used for interpretation face-to-face, but when it comes to documentation, we should use a scanner or a fax machine. And technically, we are still trying to make improvements. Mr. Holden Chow, second round, 3 minutes. Chairman, I'd like to pick up on the last point I talked about in the first round. I still think that is feasible. As long as you can mobilize the sector to set up this mechanism, this will do. There are estate agents who are willing to do business with the EM tenants who have good reputation. You can identify these estate agents and you can set up this mechanism. And even if the government doesn't get itself involved, there should be support to encourage the sector to set up this mechanism. For different sectors, you have, say, quality shops, etc., and you can set up something similar. Just now you said that you wouldn't want to promote the business of any estate agent, but that's not the case. We're just asking for an identification mechanism to identify these estate agents so that the EM tenants can save the trouble of going through all the estate agents. They can just go for those who can do business with them, who have good reputation, instead of being discriminated against. Because I think this is already the easiest solution. So will you go back and give it a thought and perhaps reply to us later? Perhaps you can't give us an answer today, but at least you can tell us that you will think along these lines and see if it works. Will you consider this as a matter of policy or principle? We understand the situation. We basically want to help the EMs in a targeted manner. Ms. Koch, we can go back and discuss with the EAA from the practitioner's point of view. We can consider whether the proposal is feasible or whether there may be a labeling effect, and that only some estate agents can take up the business of EM tenants. We need to go back and think about that. Mr. Holden Chow, any other follow-up questions? Right, you can go back and look into that, and let's say after some time at the next meeting, can you share the progress with us? Well, if necessary, we will hold a public hearing anyway. So perhaps after we discuss the healthcare issues, we can have a public hearing on both housing and healthcare issues. And by then they can come back and give us a report. I don't have any other members waiting on the list to speak. Right. Dr. N. Chang, 5 minutes, first round. Thank you, Chairman. My question is this. About EM applicants for public housing. Do you have information about their nationality or ethnicity? No. I think this just come into my mind. It's for your consideration. I understand that in some countries, there is a policy that the government doesn't prefer to put all the, EM tenants coming from the same country in the same housing estate because it doesn't help for them to be integrated into society. Instead, they would be assigned to different estates. But for families, priority would be given. Say if they are brothers, then they may be allocated flats in the same housing estate or at least in the same district so that they can look after each other. Now, for distant relatives or for tenants who aren't relatives of each other, they may be more scattered, so to speak. I want to know whether this will help them integrate better into the community. I visited some housing estates before. For example, in Lanchikok, there was a Hoilai estate. And I found that there are so many Indian, Pakistani tenants, and their children would mingle, and then the adults as well. Well, is it a good thing or not? I haven't studied into that, but I think that the administration could consider my suggestion. In the long term, we do hope that after the EMs arrive in Hong Kong, they can be integrated into our society. So should we allow them to gather in one particular district, or should they be scattered in the territory, and at the same time give priority to households of close relations? Well, do you understand? Is it a bit too complicated?
Okay, should there be integration, convergence, or separation? Would you look into these possible policies? Thank you, Chair, and Dr. Chang for her question. We do not deliberately segregate or integrate tenants. When we process applications, we apply the same standards. But it may be incidental that Dr. Chang has been to Hoilai Estate, which is a big estate. I have been to other estates and I have seen the same phenomenon. But talking about application categories, we have the harmonious family category. In other words, if there are elderly residents and they want to live closely together, then they can go for this category. And we can then put them closely together and they can even live in the same unit. There can be such an arrangement. But we don't do it deliberately. However, when the estates get older, the distribution is quite even now, and we don't do anything of that sort deliberately. Any follow-up? Can you do some research into that? Because society is developing and an even distribution may be advantageous for society. We have done a survey of certain estates. And how should I put it? Many of the residents are CSSA recipients. Is that a good thing? For the long term, I think you should even out the different categories and not put one category in particular into an estate, because we want things to be more balanced. I think, Dr. Chang, we have researched into this academically. We know there are pros and cons of either approach, but maybe we can look at other jurisdictions to see whether we can learn anything from those. Well, never mind. This is for your consideration. And if we have the next opportunity, you can give us more information. Yes, and say, for example, why other jurisdictions do a certain thing. Perhaps in the past we did not have this kind of setup, but perhaps a particular group has come to Hong Kong in big numbers. Well, we welcome them for the sake of family reunion, but We want to know or look into the advantages and disadvantages of grouping them together or not grouping them together. Mr. Shukao, first round, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I did not intend to speak, but listening to the discussion just now, I'd like to say something. If EMs come to Hong Kong and they are residents, we should treat them as one of our own, and we should help them integrate into society, and we should provide them with education and other resources. But talking about housing, I'd like to share with you my own views. I have heard that the department is processing applications in a random manner. Some people say it may be easier for them to integrate into society if they are dispersed around the entire territory. But there is another aspect. My own experience tells me that birds of the same feather should flock together. That's a principle in nature. I have direct experience. Overseas, I tried to live together with the people of that country to learn more English. And as you know, in Singapore, they also have Little India, a small township or something. You know, people just stay together if you are from the same ethnic origin. And you have China towns in overseas countries. Now, should you deliberately and artificially disperse the Chinese around so they learn English better? Well, I don't think that should be something good in reality. Well, certainly, if an ethnic group move to another place, they, of course, should learn about the culture of their adopted country. But they first need this sense of belonging, and they need to feel this the caring amongst their own. I think that is quite necessary. So let us be realistic, the department. This happens all over the world. No matter how many friends they make in Hong Kong, they will still want to stay together. The private market may be different from PRH estates. Just like Scarborough in Toronto. You know, Hong Kong people using Cantonese like to live in Scarborough. That is all right for private housing, but we are talking about PRH policy and whether we should deliberately group them together or separate them. They can go back and take a look, certainly. But if you ask me, their subjective wish is to stay together. It's just like if you put me and Chairman in Africa, we want to stay close to each other. Okay, they can go back and think about this. Second round for Dr. Junius Ho, 3 minutes. I'm a little confused as I follow this discussion because we are talking about rights of ethnic minorities. We want to show care towards EM, and we are talking about how housing is allocated by the department for EMs. I'm very happy to hear that we have CHEER, which help us overcome the language barrier. We also have the Harmonious Families Priority Scheme. But we don't have a policy to artificially segregate the EM and make them integrate into society. Yes, we want them to integrate into society, but we should not do it by artificially separating them. This is where I get confused. We want to provide them with support for the sake of humanity so they can live here without discrimination. As I was asking you, we should be good towards them. The Hong Kong residents are waiting 4.9 years for PRH, but now since we have the Harmonious Families Priority Scheme, we would be able to let them have 5-person units earlier. It is a shorter queue and they wait shorter time. Now this is then in line with looking after the rights of EMs. But of course, at the same time, you have to strike a balance against the rights of Hong Kong people. But here at this subcommittee, we at least should treat EM at least a par with others, if not more favorably? Well, actually, we are being more favorable to EMs because they are a smaller group, and therefore the support given to them is relatively big. This is our terms of reference. I thought we are here to do this. It is not that we can't afford to give them preferential treatment. This is how we should show our care to them. I think this is the purpose of this subcommittee. I'm very happy to hear we have CHEER and the Harmonious Families Priority Scheme, that we have a hotline, and also the hotline 2712-2712. But how can this be publicized so that the government is not criticized all the time? We should state in open that we have done a good job. Just now, I was asking you whether you would ask for the nationality so that housing can be allocated. This is not for discriminating against them, but we want the service to be good enough so they are helped. And in fact, we are not doing anything that is unjust. And if you have not asked for the information, you should. And then you should come back to this SC that you have given them actual help. Well, I think your point is clear. Please go back and consider it without flouting or contravening anti-discrimination laws. We should try our best to help these people. Holden Chow, third round. Just another viewpoint. Dr. Chang talked about segregating the EMs. I have heard divergent views amongst members. I can say something for your reference. I was once in France to have an exchange with officials over there about integration of EMs, and the French officials told us that they actually go along Dr. Chang's proposal, and that is to segregate the EMs artificially. They told me that this would be conducive to the overall integration of EMs, particularly the next generation. And they have told us successful examples. Since I have heard this from Dr. Anne Chang, and of course I have also heard opposing views, but I'm just here to let you know some information from my direct experience. Thank you, Mr. Chow. Officials, please go back and think about the policy and different approaches. And Chang, second round, 3 minutes. Chairman, I'm not really saying that they should be segregated. I'm just saying perhaps you can consider whether the approach should be segregation or integration. If you say, let us just leave it to chance, and you do random allocation, I understand that to be the practice now. But I can see in certain estates that there are a big number of EMs. And I'm thinking, if that's the case, should we provide them with more assistance, particularly the children? And they would be in their own ghetto. And in the end, they may have limited opportunities in society because they tend to gather in their own ghetto. Say an Indian Pakistani family, first they are in Shamshui-Po, and then another one in Kwun Tong, and the next one in another district. So they will be in touch with more local people. This will definitely be good for the next generation. It's good for a larger family to stay together. And to be frank, I have talked to them. They don't mind. They have left their own hometown. They are here, a new place, and they want to make new friends. Those who want to stay together are like those Chinese people in Chinatown. You know, you can't find any young people in Chinatowns. Who stay in the Chinatowns? Only the elderly who do not know English. So they want to remain in Chinatown. In Hong Kong now, if they come, they are rather young. And the older people may be brought in after a while to help look after grandchildren. I am speaking from this feeling that maybe the department subconsciously puts them together. Is that good in the long run? And if that's the case, should you provide, for example, special education or something? You talked about Little Italy, Little Korea. Well, you have these townships in many places, but we are not talking about residents, but eateries, shops, which tend to concentrate at a certain place. So people of a particular race can go to the same place to do shopping and other things, and then after that they would disperse. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Perhaps in due course we can invite the EM groups to come and give their views as well. We don't have much time left. The fourth round is Claudia Mo, 3 minutes. I don't think I need 3 minutes. Public housing is valuable resources in Hong Kong. I think that all applicants should be treated equally. I don't think the administration should spend time to look into the idea of living in scattered places or living in the same estate, especially for the you pinpoint the Indian Pakistani. Don't even think about it. I think it's just our nature. Well, even if we travel abroad, we would visit the Chinatown. What's the point? Since we are Chinese, is the power of people. They tend to congregate. Hence, Little Korea, Little Italy, etc. France, Hong Kong. Well, France is a country, Hong Kong is a city. I don't think it's a suitable comparison. I don't need an answer. I don't think a study is necessary. All right, so that's another comment for your reference. If there are no other comments, then we have come to the end of the meeting. Next time we'll discuss healthcare issues and also support Center for EMs and organizations such as CHEER. Following that, we will hold a public hearing. I thank the administration for attending. I hope that next time we can have another discussion. If there is nothing else under AOB, then meeting's adjourned. Thank you.